Do you condemn armed Palestinian resistance? It's a tricky question, and the answer is, wait, before I answer that, let's talk some history. First up, the story of America's first terrorist, John Brown, a devout and fierce abolitionist. John Brown wreaked havoc in the pre-Civil War American South. In 1859, Brown and 18 men seized a U.S. military arsenal at Harper's Ferry in Virginia with the intent to disperse the weapons to black men with the hopes of waging a guerrilla war against the institution of slavery in America. During his attack, Brown and his men killed several people. His uprising was short-lived, however, as he was shortly captured, tried, and sentenced to death. But during his sentencing, Brown told the court that his actions against slavery were consistent with God's commandments. For centuries, black slaves were tortured, tarred and feathered, humiliated, dehumanized, exploited, beaten, raped, and killed at the hands of slave owners. But in the minds of the slave owners, their actions were justified, and they used religion and all sorts of perverted logic to sanitize their deranged worldview. But history knows otherwise, and more than 200 years later, John Brown, America's first terrorist, is celebrated by the American government. And he wouldn't be the only resistance fighter the world would celebrate. Let's not forget Nelson Mandela, the South African hero and Nobel Peace Prize winner, the global symbol of peace and freedom, immortalized for his struggle to end South African apartheid. He too was at one time considered a terrorist. What? Why? As part of the African National Congress, Mandela resisted South African apartheid peacefully through nonviolent protests, strikes, and boycotts. But in 1960, South African police murdered 69 protesters and declared the ANC illegal. Left with no other options and forced underground, Mandela and the ANC had no choice. Oppressors only come into power through violence and the use of force. And to protect their positions of power, they justify their own atrocities while vilifying and condemning the resistance of the oppressed, further driving the oppressed to acts of unfettered violence. From the slave uprisings in ancient Rome to the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto, oppressed peoples across history have risen up in armed resistance to their oppressors, at times going to any and all lengths to achieve their freedom. The Jews, caged in the Warsaw Ghetto, even made ingenious use of underground tunnels they had built to organize and carry out resistance against their Nazi oppressors. No, not those tunnels. Those are Hamas tunnels. Jewish tunnels in the Warsaw Ghetto. Yeah, that's the one. Which brings us to the plight of the Palestinians. Now, we all know the story, and if we don't worry, I'm gonna tell you. In 1948, armed Zionist paramilitary groups violently ethnically cleansed Palestinian villages and laid the groundwork for the state of Israel. They killed, raped, and tortured Palestinians. This isn't my characterization of their actions, it's theirs. Just listen to the accounts of these former Zionist militants from 1948.
בלי נקיפת מצפון.
הרגת, אז עשית דבר טוב. הייתי מוכן להרוג.
אני אספר לה שאני הייתי רוצח.
As a result of the violence and conquest, 750,000 Palestinians became displaced refugees. This event is known as the Nekbah, meaning the catastrophe. The Palestinians and neighboring Arab states resisted, but they were powerless to stop Israel's expansion. With military and financial support from the US and Europe,